Good morning and welcome to the Flexible Space Association's second Flex Generation webinar. Flex Generation is a new initiative from Flexa that's particularly targeted at people aged around 35 and under working in the flex industry, but everyone is very welcome to this webinar today. And we are joined by Lucy Cox from the Academe, who is going to talk us through on some with a presentation on public speaking. We will have some time for questions at the end. If you put them into the chat box, we will hold them all until the end of the presentation. So if anything comes up as we're going through, do add them, or we can pick those up at the end as well. So I am going to share Lucy's slides and then leave you with her.
Thank you, Jane. Lovely bit of public speaking as well to kick us off. Well done. Hello, everybody. I am Lucy Cox. I'm going to be trying my best to talk you through some of the challenges and the neuroscience behind the fear of public speaking. It's such a common thing, isn't it, that most of us can experience. So the first thing that I want to say is that statistically, more people are frightened of public speaking than death. And this always gets a little bit of a giggle, right? Because actually, this seems like quite a dramatic statement. It came from a study back in 1973. And it is always at the top of people's fear list. I don't want to stand on a stage. I don't want a microphone. I don't want to talk in front of people. But when it comes to running a business, actually, this is a skill that we really need. We need to be able to make a good first impression. We need to pitch. We need to have our voices heard in meetings. We need to go to networking events. And having some basic skills when it comes to public speaking is really vital. Now, if statistically more people are frightened of public speaking than death, there must be an evolutionary reason for it, right? It is not an accident that we are the human beings that we are today. Natural selection has meant that, everything has served some sort of evolutionary purpose. And also, just to say, this isn't just for people in the early stages of their career. I work with people right across the different career trajectories and career levels, and public speaking comes up again and again. So there are lots of reasons people cite for being frightened of public speaking. I'm sure some of these will seem really familiar to you as well. So forgetting that content, my mind has gone blank. I can't remember anything. Freezing to the spot. This was my experience when I first got on stage. I couldn't remember my own name. I just froze in the lights like a deer. We have a physiological response as well, don't we? So sweating, fidgeting, dry mouth, and we're really dreading experiencing those physiological symptoms. Maybe you're frightened of falling over or looking like an idiot or being judged by people that are in the room. Maybe it's tech problems. I'm a bit of a technophobe myself, so I can totally empathize. What if the slides don't work? What if there's a power cut? All the what ifs. And also not knowing enough. Maybe you feel like you're not the most knowledgeable person in the room. So standing up in front of other people who potentially have more knowledge than you, they might ask those difficult questions. And again, that might cause you to feel slightly inferior. And we don't like those, do we? But there's one thing that you need to know about your brain, and that is it is wired for safety, not happiness. And there's a nice in brackets, sorry, with that, because we all want to be happy all the time, right? We want to feel comfortable. We want to feel relaxed. But actually, our brains just simply aren't wired that way. In fact, there's 4 areas that your brain is going to prioritize safety in. The first one is physical safety. This goes way back when we're living in caves. Obviously, we don't want to get eaten. We don't want to get hurt. So our brain is going to prioritize our physical safety. Now, anything in modern times that might be a threat to our physical safety is going to trigger a fight or flight response. Hopefully, this is a term that's quite familiar to you, okay? The second one is social safety. Now, we're a tribal species. We are not fierce creatures, guys. We do not have the big fangs and the big claws, but we do rely on having our tribe. We rely on numbers, which means if we're cast out of our tribe, that means we're absolutely guaranteed to be gobbled up by a saber-toothed tiger, evolutionary speaking. So actually, to remain socially safe, to be included, to be wanted, to be useful within our tribe, is a real catalyst for our safety. And any threat to that is going to trigger a fight or flight response. The third one is emotional safety. We don't want to feel shame. We don't want to feel regret or resentment or embarrassment. All of these things feel really horrible, don't they? And the final one, which is a slightly more modern one, is financial safety. So any threat to our financial safety is going to trigger a fight or flight response. Now, fight or flight, obviously, we're thinking about running away, putting our fists up, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that in modern life. This might look a bit like avoidance or over preparation, people pleasing, passivity. So things like no eye contact, really closed down body language. It's all this version of keeping ourselves small. Maybe you're going to overcompensate when you're giving that talk or you're having to have that difficult conversation with somebody. But there is one thing that we know for sure. Confidence and fear both require believing in something that hasn't happened yet. And I love this quote because it feels so real in the moment, but ultimately it is simply our imagination in overdrive. We are trying to come up with a worst case scenario, try to predict the future so that your brain can keep you safe. Now, we know our brain is wired for safety over happiness. So guess what? We are going to always err on the side of caution. Our brains are pre-programmed with something called a negativity bias, which means that you're always going to look for the poisonous snake over the pretty butterfly. Overlay that onto public speaking, you're always going to be thinking about what is going to go wrong rather than what could go right. But it's just your imagination and it hasn't happened yet. But it does create a physiological response. And we never know what's actually going to happen in the future, do we? But we do know that whatever thoughts we're having, whatever story we're telling ourselves in between our ears is going to generate feelings and emotions. Okay. Now you think about this in the context of your everyday life. If you're telling yourself something that is creating feelings of excitement, or you're telling yourself a story that's creating feelings of anxiety or fear, this is why two people can walk into exactly the same situation and feel very differently about it. It's because they're having different thoughts. Now, thoughts, I mean the narrative that we're telling ourselves, the images that we're creating in our brain, the language that we're using, and the focus. Yeah, are we focusing on things going well or things going badly? Am I focusing on the threat that I'm feeling, or am I focusing on the potential opportunities in that situation? So whatever we're thinking is going to generate feelings and emotions. Now, just like train carriages shunting down the track, those feelings and emotions are going to dictate how we behave, the actions that we take. And of course, when I talk about actions, it's things we do, but also things we avoid doing. So in the case of public speaking, if we're waiting behind the wings, if we know it's our turn to speak next, and those thoughts are going round over our heads, all the what ifs, and we're feeling that anxiety, guess what? Our behavior is going to be closed down. It might be overcompensatory. We might be shaking. We might be using lots of ums and ers. Our mind might go blank. We might be focusing in on people in the audience and reading their faces just to see whether I'm right, I'm a terrible speaker, they think so too. So those feelings are going to generate that behavior. And ultimately, the way that we behave are going to determine the results that we get. So if we're behaving in a way that's very closed down, very anxious, maybe we're talking really fast or we're talking really quietly, actually that's going to determine the results that we get. It's going to create this result of either I'm a good speaker or I'm a bad speaker. Ultimately, you can be a fantastic speaker, but it all starts with the way that we are thinking in the moment. Now, All of our brains have something called mirror neurons inside of them. Okay, I like to think of these little mirror neurons as little parrots that are going around our brain, because what a mirror neuron does is it enables us to feel what other people are feeling. This is why if you walk down the street and somebody's got a big grin on their face, you can't help but put a grin on your face as well. This is how babies learn emotions, and they learn to really tune into people, because they're mimicking the facial expressions, mimicking the body language. You've probably heard of mirroring when it comes to sort of business and sales. Same principle. But if you're stood on stage, if you're in the moment and you are behaving in a way that's really anxious, if you're feeling really anxious, actually there's a really good chance that the audience are going to be feeling the way you're feeling. This is why I'm not a big believer in fake it till you make it, guys, all right? What might be coming out of our mouth? People know it's not the truth. It's much, much better to really handle and deal with those thoughts that we're having in the first place. Now, essentially, what's happening when these feelings are creating these actions that we're doing is we're talking about emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is when our emotions are in control of us. We've lost control. Normally, emotional dysregulation is one or other side of the spectrum. We're either really, really anxious, worried, scared, sad, or we're very hyper. Those of you that have young families, you probably know what I mean by being dysregulated on the other side, yeah? Kids get a little bit crazy. Well, we do it too. And we can become very quickly emotionally dysregulated when our thoughts are telling us we're not safe. Your brain is going to want to do everything it possibly can do to get back to a place of safety. Now, when our brains are in fight or flight, we've got no access to flow. We've got no access to creativity. We are in pure survival mode. And this is why your mind goes blank. This is why it's really, really hard to maintain good body language and to speak really confidently and slowly and clearly, because you are in survival mode. But what is it that we're really frightened of? Are we frightened of failure, or are we frightened of how failure feels? Now, just think about that for a minute, because failure in itself is just a fact, right? We're all going to fail at stuff. We're all going to mess things up. We're all going to get things wrong. But is it the feeling that generates the shame, the embarrassment? Is it that what we are running from at the end of the day? I really want you to think about this quote. There is no emotion that can hurt you, only the way you hurt yourself in response to that emotion. Now think about that. There is no emotion that can hurt you. You can feel deep shame, deep embarrassment, absolutely awful anxiety, but that emotion itself isn't going to hurt you. It's not going to damage you. It just feels uncomfortable. But what we do is we react to that emotion. I need to get out of this state. I need to make people like me. I need to make sure that I'm emotionally protected, socially protected, physically protected, and financially protected. So we knee-jerk react. And this is where we hurt ourselves. And this is what we actually call self-sabotage. So some of the things we might do, we might avoid doing the talk in the first place, or when we're up on stage, we might be avoiding eye contact. We might be trying to read everything off the slides to avoid using our brains to really think and be in that moment. We might be over apologizing for things. I've seen this time and time again when people are on stage. They're apologizing before they've even really opened their mouth and said anything. Maybe they're fronting it out, yeah? Maybe they're really closed down and obviously very, very terrified and shy. But actually, this is all a version of emotionally spiraling at the end of the day. Plus, emotion is actually only experienced when we give meaning to a situation. So when we go back to that idea of failing at something, actually, the facts of the situation might be, I forgot my words, the tech didn't work, people laughed, I couldn't answer the question. Like, they're just facts. There's no emotion when it comes to facts whatsoever. The emotion comes from the story we tell ourselves about that. What is it we're making that mean? And it's a really interesting thing just to stop and ponder. What am I making this, inverted commas, failure mean? Maybe you totally nail that talk. What do you make that mean? Maybe you smashed it. Are you tethering your self-worth onto that, onto the outcome? And if you don't do so well in the talk, what are you making that mean? But we do know that staying in fight or flight is a real barrier to speaking very eloquently, very clearly, and having access to that incredible brain that you've got that actually knows the answers. It knows that it's capable of doing everything. So your brain is like a toddler with a Sharpie. It is full of potential, but needs careful management. There is literally nothing your brain cannot do as long as we are managing that brain carefully. But you cannot control everything. As much as we'd love to, we'd all love to be in control of absolutely every element, wouldn't we? But actually trying to control things is either going to drive you mad or it's going to stop you from moving forward. And neither of those are an outcome that we wanted. But the only thing you do have full control over are your thoughts. Now, it doesn't feel like it all the time, does it? It feels like thoughts just pop into our heads. But nobody else has any control over what you are thinking in the moment. And you can parent the way that you are thinking at any given time to change the way you're feeling, which will then change the way you behave, which will then change the outcome that you got. Now, like toddlers, we're all emotionally driven, right? We like to think that we're much more superior to toddlers having a tantrum in a supermarket, but all we've done is internalize that experience. We are quite reactive. We are safety motivated, yeah? And actually, we need a little bit of careful parenting. But guess what? That's down to us now. And we're just not taught how to do this as youngsters, as adults, but we can parent our own minds. So the big question, is there actually anything that we can do about it? Well, the good thing is, yes, absolutely there is. Now, what I teach when it comes to public speaking is something called the 3 R's. Now, if you've got a bit of paper, you want to jot this down, feel free. So the first R is recognize. Now, what I'm talking about here is recognize that you're dysregulated. Recognize that the talk in your brain is making you feel the way that you're feeling. Tune into those thoughts. Write them down if you have to. What is it that I'm focused on? How am I feeling in this moment? What is the story that I'm telling myself? And what does dysregulation look like for me? All of us will experience dysregulation in a different way, and we will all behave in a different way when it comes to dysregulation. So first and foremost, get familiar with your personal brand of emotional dysregulation. What does it look and feel like? Now, the second one is to regulate yourself. It's really hard to regulate yourself if you haven't recognized that you're dysregulated, okay? So recognize you're dysregulated, and then we work on emotionally regulating ourselves. Now, I'm going to whack you over the head with the mindfulness stick, but I don't mean sat in lotus position for an hour a day. If you have time for that and it works for you, keep doing it. But don't let mindfulness be another thing on your to-do list. Stack it onto stuff you already do. I'd like to think you all brush your teeth. So while you're brushing your teeth, think about, how does it taste? What is the sensation? How does your toothbrush sound if you're lucky enough to have an electric toothbrush? How does the water sound when it's tinkling out of the tap? What reflections can you see? Make it a mindful experience. When you eat, when you drink, when you take the dog for a walk, when you have a cup of tea, notice the steam, notice the smell, notice the temperature and the taste. Anything that brings you back into a sensory experience, we can class as mindfulness, and it is going to really help to emotionally regulate you. Now, if you're waiting to take to the stage, if you're waiting in a networking event to be able to introduce yourself, or you want to say something in a team meeting, think about, how can I regulate myself in that moment? Breathing exercises work really, really well. Look up things like box breathing. Nobody will know that you're doing them, but they are proven to regulate your nervous system. Okay, so embrace mindfulness as a regular practice and create a toolkit of emotional regulation techniques that you can use in the moment. And the final one, consider how you want to feel and what thoughts you need to be able to feel that way. We know that negative thoughts cause certain emotions. So what do positive thoughts create? What does gratitude create? What does focusing just on the facts create? Play with it. What is it you need to think to generate the emotions that you want? Now, second one, use visualization. It is no accident that some of the most elite athletes and business people on the planet use visualization. And the reason is your brain is very, very, very smart, but it does not know the difference between imagination and reality. This is why you get a physiological reaction from trying to predict the future, telling yourself the stories. We can visualize how we want a talk to go. We can play it out over and over and over in our brains. We can play out the worst case scenarios and how would we deal with them? What if we do get that question we can't answer? What if I do forget my words? What if the tech does fall down? What am I going to do? And we can visualize it. Now, what you're actually doing in this moment is you're creating new neural pathways. So you're actually changing the shape of your brain to mean that if those things ever happened, you are far more likely to respond in the way that you have visualized it rather than descend into a fight or flight state. And then the final part of the regroup is just asking yourself some questions. Does this situation require more empathy? Maybe on myself, maybe for the people that I'm talking to. Do I need more curiosity? Am I jumping to conclusions in this situation? Am I assuming that this is going to be the same situation as the last talk I did? Maybe you need more creativity. I think it was Einstein that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So maybe we need to do things a bit creatively. Maybe you don't need slides. Maybe you feel a lot more comfortable rapping. Who knows, right? People actually really enjoy individuality and do something that makes you feel calm, collected, and emotion regulated. Maybe you need to connect to your values. Now, really good questions you can ask around your values might be things like, what am I going to be proud of in this situation? What advice would I give to other people who are in this same situation? What is the most important thing to me? How do I want other people to feel off the back of this talk? How can I parent myself through this in the way I would parent my own children through it? So we can really connect with those human values that we have. Action is another one. Maybe this just needs to happen, guys. If you're naturally quite an avoidant personality, actually, what body language do you need to be able to take action? If I need to make a difficult phone call, which I do class under public speaking to some degree, or coming on and doing this sort of stuff, I might stand up, or I might walk around the room first to get me pumped up a little bit. Maybe I need to sit in a chair with a really upright back. Whatever needs to happen for you to take action, have a think about it. And then the final one is honesty. Now, honesty is really important when it comes to leadership, in my opinion, because how many of us think we're the only ones that struggle with this? And not just this, right? Any element of business where we're struggling with things like imposter syndrome and self-doubt, comparison with everybody else around us. Trust me, I've been doing this job for a very long time. I see it at every level with every single human being, and yet we don't talk about it. We're not honest with our colleagues about the way that we're feeling. But as soon as we open up, it gives other people permission to open up as well. And it creates a really lovely, safe, social, which is really important for us, space for which we can explore this stuff. So ultimately, we're looking for progress over perfection. Now, any perfectionists that are tuning in, actually, some of the best talks I've ever been to have been where people have got it wrong and they've owned it. They've used that honesty. They've come on stage and said, this is not my happy place, but bear with me, right? It's not about apologizing. It's about owning it. It's about bringing your own personality. And also it's about being able to pick apart the talk at the end of the day in a really objective way. This is what went really well. This is what I need to work on. Now, there's a really good saying you've probably heard, are you using this experience as teacher or torture? Now, whenever we come away from an experience, it's a really important moment to be able to build those neural pathways to make it a better experience next time. If you've come off stage, if you've come out of a team meeting and you start beating yourself up in your head, guess what? Your brain isn't going to want to do that again. Next time you come into that situation, you're going to be even more anxious. You're going to doubt yourself even more. Far better to come out of these situations and look for things that actually you're really proud of yourself for, you're really grateful for, or we look at things simply as facts. Teacher or torture. Ultimately, your mind is a muscle and it's going to take time to master, right? However old you are now, that's how many years you've put into conditioning your brain to think and feel and behave the way it does when it comes to public speaking. But it comes back a lot quicker. Keep going, guys. I promise you, you're going to get there. So in summary, your brain will create worst case scenario stories to keep you safe. It is supposed to. Do not beat yourself up, but also recognize that they are just stories. They are things that haven't happened yet. And if you're going to tell yourself stories, you may as well tell yourself good ones. By staying emotionally regulated, you can parent your brain's narrative and change the way you feel. Practice those day-by-day emotional regulation, mindfulness techniques, and think about what emotional regulation toolkits you can have in the moment. It is the only way you are going to get access to the part of your brain you need to have to give a good talk. By changing the way you feel, you change the way you behave, and ultimately the results that you get. It all starts with your thoughts. It doesn't matter what's happened in the past. It doesn't matter what's going to happen in the future. You have no control over that whatsoever, but you do have control over what is happening in your brain right now. And finally, over time, we've got this amazing brain that is neuroplastic, which means it constantly changes and evolves. And this neuroplasticity will support your brain to see public speaking as less scary, even, dare I say, enjoyable. So, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to take a swig of my drink. Hi, Jane.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was really insightful in what we can do. I think I probably have quite a bit of insight into other people's thoughts on public speaking, because every year I put together the program of speakers for the Flexa conference. And it is interesting, and going out to our own industry, how many people who are even in quite senior roles might say, oh, there's no way I could speak on it, or that are reluctant but do it, and then realize it wasn't nearly as scary or difficult as they thought. And it's about confidence sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it really is. And like I say, we all think that if I had more experience, more qualifications, if I was in a senior pay grade, if I had better relationships with people, then I would feel more confident doing this talk. You won't. You really, really won't, because that's not where it comes from. It's always going to come from parenting the thoughts that we've got in our brain.
So we've got a bit of time for questions if anyone has anything they want to add into the chat box. Just to start off, and if someone's nervous about speaking, does it help to learn the talk verbatim like a script, or is that a bad idea?
Well, now I will caveat this to say you've got to do what's right for you, but don't get pulled into the idea that if I learn this word for word, then I'm not going to mess it up. This comes down to how much you trust yourself, right? And if you don't trust yourself, that's a whole different coaching conversation, right? In my experience, if you are going to learn something verbatim, it actually takes up a different part of your brain. And it means if you drop one word, if you lose your thread at all, it's gone. It's really hard to get back on track. Whereas if you've got bullet points, if you've got something which is more driven by knowledge or a story that you've got in your head, you're going to feel far more comfortable if you do make the inevitable stumbles that you're going to have. So it's, my advice would be to steer away from learning things verbatim if you can. Although it seems logical and it seems tempting to do it, I do believe you're setting yourself up for a fall if that's what you do.
Yeah. And I guess another point is that if you're speaking on something publicly, it's because you have expertise in that topic, isn't it? And that's the thing to remember as well. You wouldn't be asked to speak on it if you weren't.
No, but you'll never feel ready. You'll never feel like the expert. Yeah, you'll always wonder why someone's asked you, and you'll always eyeball somebody in the audience and say, but they know more about this than I do. And that narrative is going to create that social reflex into fight or flight. So, yeah.
And if someone has done public speaking and they just feel like it just hasn't gone well, and it's really, is there anything that they can still do? Do you think they can still rewire their brains on this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I used to be terrible at it, really, really awful at it. And there's so much, we talked about teacher or torture, right? So there's so much learning in getting it wrong. I think sometimes the hardest people to work with public speaking are the people that are okay, because it's really hard for them to see actually where were the pain points throughout. So actually, by not having done a good job in the past, you can kind of pick that apart, pick out the bits you need to work on, where you need a little bit more support, and be able to move forward with that. But you need to be able to do it in a way that's not whacking yourself over the head with a stick, not beating yourself up all the time.
So if someone has made that leap to thinking this is something I can do, have you got any tips for securing speaking opportunities or going after them? Is a question someone watching has asked.
Yes, I have, and this is going to seem ridiculously simple, but ask for them. And I know when it comes to speaking out loud and public speaking, we're so averse from picking up the phone, walking up to somebody at a networking event, being proactive, looking at events. It's about rapport, it's about human connection, it's about, really just being brave and going and asking for it. The kind of back end to that is making sure that people are going to Google you. If they're going to put you on stage, if they're going to put you at their event, they're going to want to know what you're talking about. So make sure that digital footprint is looking absolutely spot on. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is good, that you've got maybe references on there for speaking that you've done in the past. Maybe there's a little video or some photographs of you speaking. If speaking is what you want to do, get that digital footprint, but you have to just go and ask for it.
Yeah. And it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, as someone, as I say, who organises a conference programme, I do get a surprising number of people who do ask. Often they're people that will regularly speak in public, and actually what is nice is to get people that aren't on every conference program. And so if there is somebody that is thinking this is something they might want to take the opportunity of, I think I would be willing to take that risk, even if I can't find lots of information on them having done, as long as I feel like they're really confident in their topic and what they will be speaking about. So I don't feel like people should have to have had lots of experience that
no, absolutely. And I think this is where recommendation and referral come in as well. So making it very, very clear to your network that you want to do more speaking, and ask your network to recommend you. Similarly, if you're doing a talk, I could do it now. It's like, actually, if you're looking for a speaker for your event, in those situations where people have seen you and they're happy to recommend you, plant that seed in their head, so the next time they're working with their events department, or they've got a friend or colleague who is looking for a speaker, they can go, I remember Lucy, she's open for speaking opportunities, she was really good at this event that we did. So being really open and direct with what it is you want, and giving people permission to recommend you for that.
Okay, well, perhaps just as a final question, you've obviously given us lots of advice and tips this morning, which has been really helpful. But has it always been that way for you? Have you had any particularly terrifying public speaking that you've had to do? And how did you prepare?
Well, yes, one in particular. I mean, the first time I got on stage, I couldn't remember my name, the lights in my face, the sweating, the whole thing. But in 2018, my business partner and I went on Dragon's Den. And when it comes to the epitome of terrifying public speaking, I think that has to be absolutely top of the food chain, because it is a really unforgiving place. You know that you're speaking in front of people that probably know a lot more about business than you do, and their job, purely for entertainment with millions of pounds of budget behind them, is to pull you apart very publicly. And that was particularly terrifying. And the way that we prepared for that, this will make you laugh, Claire. We actually learnt what we wanted to say. We didn't script it. We learnt the bullet points of what we wanted to say. And while each of us were talking, the other one would poke the other one with cocktail sticks, right? And it was about stimulating a really high pressure, distractible environment whereby we're constantly like, like this, but we've still got to remember what it is we've got to say. It's very, very silly, but it really worked, because then when we were actually in a very dysregulated, high pressure environment, we'd had that preparation. We had developed those neural pathways. We've really, really learned how to deal with that, and that works really well for us. I'm not saying go and stab your colleagues with cocktail sticks.
No, that's not official advice from you, but
it's not official advice.
Okay, well, thank you ever so much, Lucy. I think that's been really helpful. I'm sure to many people, and we will post this on video onto our YouTube channel later today, so it's available if you want to share it with colleagues, or if you want to just have a refresh of it yourself, maybe even just before you have a public speaking engagement in the future. So just to finish off, we've got our next Flex Generation webinar on the 29th of October, which is looking at networking, which is probably another thing that many people find pretty scary as a thought, but is maybe hopefully we're going to find is easier in practice with some good tips on that. So so thank you, Lucy, and have a good day, everybody. Goodbye.